Tonight we're going to be looking at the Glock 19 Gen 5 MOS and the CZ P-01 Omega. Are you ready? Stand by. So welcome back to the channel. Tonight we're going to be comparing the workhorse carry models from the CZ and Glock lineups. Now both of these guns have a very similar size and very similar missions, coming in with about 4-inch barrels. Both guns come equipped with rails for accessories such as lights and shorter grips that make them good for concealed carry. Now the MSRP on these guns isn't even close. It's only about $646 for the CZ P-01 Omega, and it's about $745 for the Glock 19 Gen 5 MOS. However, you can find a Glock 19 Gen 5 MOS for about $620 street, whereas the only P-01 Omegas I could find in stock at the time of filming this were selling for $646. So effectively they are very similar in cost. One of you has already started to comment, and I need you to go ahead and stop. I'm aware that this is a hammer-fired gun and this is a striker-fired gun, and yes, you can compare them. Now I want to spend a lot of time talking about the performance difference of these guns, but we do need to knock out some of the physical differences, so we're going to go down and look at it on the mat. But before we do that, this is your first chance to comment. Where are you out of the gate on this? Are you favoring the Glock or the CZ? Let me know in the comments below. Now the stated weight on the CZ is 28.01 ounces, but wearing these G10 lock grips, I'm getting slightly more than that. And the stated weight on the Glock is about 23 ounces, and my measurement is about the same as that. So if you are sensitive to carrying weight around all day, the Glock is going to be the lighter weight option. Now the actual trigger pull weight on this gun, I was getting about 8.5 pounds, but this does have the Cajun reduced power trigger spring because my OEM trigger spring broke. So it was about 9 pounds before putting that part in. And the trigger pull looks like this. Stages and stacks real bad right there. Creates kind of a semi-wall because it just gets so heavy right before it breaks. But it starts with a start from half cock. But it starts with a little bit of slack if you're carrying it decocked. And then it starts to build, and then it just gets, there's a lot more force needed when you get to there, and then the hammer falls. Single action right now is pulling at about 2 3/4 pounds. It was pulling at about 3 pounds prior to the trigger return spring, but you can see lots and lots of slack, lots of take up. There's a very soft, mushy wall, and it rolls right through. No big deal. It is a shooter's trigger. If you're going to shoot bullseye groups, it's going to be harder because there's not a clean, crisp wall on it, but it still is a very shootable trigger. The actual trigger shape on the P-01 is quite nice. I very much like that flattened bar. Now the trigger pull on the Glock is typical Glock fare, but on the Gen 5 models, they actually are pretty nice out of the factory. So this one is actually not shot that much. This is one of my newer guns, hasn't been shot all that much. And it's pulling at about 4.5 pounds right now, but it is a very nice, predictable pull. I honestly wouldn't even change this trigger. So you can see there's a little bit of take up, and now I'm on the firing pin safety. It creates kind of a nice firm wall. You can see a little bit of wiggle due to a little bit of squish and creep until it breaks and releases cleanly, and there's very little over travel. The reset on the Glock is much better, just that much. Very short reset, and the trigger swings forward hard, pushing your finger forward, helping you reset the trigger. Versus the reset on the CZ, which is right there, and then it'll go out further to give you more slack. So the reset is not as strong. Part of that is due to the fact I'm using the Cajun trigger return spring, but it's not a bad trigger. Now, as far as ergonomics are concerned, the P-01 is going to be the clear winner if you just go off how it's going to feel in your hand at the gun store counter. And the reason I say that is it is sculpted to fit a human hand beautifully. If you look at the grip tang, the back strap, it has a nice narrow point that fits very nicely in the web of your hand. That beaver tail keeps your skin away from the hammer, looks nice, feels great. The hook at the bottom of the grip right there kind of funnels your fingers up under the trigger guard, which feels good. You've got this superficial checkering on the front of the gun that does absolutely nothing. The grips from the factory are going to be black rubber deals, which are going to bend. If you do a lot of draw practice, you can actually catch this corner of the grip and it will sort of bend up, but it's not that big a deal. They have the same contour as these lock grips that it's currently wearing. They have a nice little palm swell that fits in your hand. It feels good. It fills up the hollow part of your hand. Now, the grip texture on the stock rubber grips is okay. It gets a little bit slick as your hand gets sweaty, but for the most part, it's going to be fine. It does kind of grab your garment as you're running around with it. Now, the point of aim is going to be more natural for the P-01, but if you grip the gun like I advocate you to grip the gun in my grip video, the sights are going to line up automatically anyway. On the support side, you don't get much room to build a grip, and when I start to push into the gun, I'm pushing forward on my fingertips. So as a size large glove wearer, the P-01 doesn't fit my hands all that great, but it feels great in hand. Now, the Gen 5 19's ergonomics have improved over the past generations and even the early Gen 5 generations. The big difference with the MOS model is these front serrations, which you now have, and you do not have the half moon cutout on the front of the grip. The grip texture is pretty good. It's a little bit aggressive, but it's not going to tear up your side or your garment as you're carrying it. The purchase that it allows you, you get pretty high up the beaver tang and very high up under the trigger guard, and you get all up in there. And they provide back straps as well that allow you to increase the length of pull as you see necessary. Now, when you grip the Glock next to the CZ, it feels like picking up a 2x4 with eased edges. That turns off a lot of shooters. However, it's actually one of the strengths of the Glock pistol because it is so light. It has such a wide grip at the back that it spreads out the impact from the recoil across your palm a little bit nicer than the CZ, which concentrates more in the web of your hand. And as a result of that, both guns shoot about equally soft. Now, the trigger reach is going to be generous for people with medium to large hands. Smaller handed shooters might have issues, but they're going to have issues on the P-01 as well with the double action stroke. All the controls on the Glock are exactly where you want them to be. Nice oversized mag release and a slide release right there. And similarly on the P-01, it has an excellent mag release. I love the shape of these mag release. It's very easy to get to and you don't have to break your grip at all to get there. The decocker is forward swept on the Omega models and it works excellent. It's fantastic. It's right there. And you get this nice oversized slide release. I guess technically I can reach it with my firing thumb, but on reloads, I usually drop the slide with my support thumb on the CZs. Now, the sights are probably the most important thing to be accurate on a gun such as this, and the stock sights on the Glock are absolute garbage. They are made out of plastic. They will wear out, fly out of the dovetail. They are really not great sights. However, the stock sights on the CZ P-01 are better on the P-01 Omega. They're kind of trash on the regular P-01s, but they're steel. However, on the Omega model, you get a much better rear sight with a very good sight picture, and you can swap out the front sight for a fiber optic sight, which is what I did, and black out the 3 dots. On the Glock, you're just buying new sights. There's not really a good way around it. Now, getting into the actual performance of these guns, I didn't see a big difference in them. The CZs are reported as being super accurate, and they are very practically accurate. Most people with substandard grips can usually print good groups with the CZ due to the way it is shaped, but the Glock was able to print groups exactly the same size. I saw no difference in mechanical accuracy, but I shoot Glocks in competition, so I can hold a group pretty good with the Glock pistol. Now, with these being defensive guns, that first shot is going to be important, and most people are going to carry the CZ in double action. So you got a 9-pound plus or minus trigger pull to deal with, whereas the Glock is going to have the 4.5–5-pound trigger. So despite the Glock trigger being less impressive to pull in dry fire, the results on the target were effectively the same for me, and I've shot both of these guns a good bit. Either way you go, either one of these guns is going to be more accurate than pretty much all but the best shooters. Now, since both of these guns have been carried before, since I have lovely Harry's holsters for both of them, there's a discount code in the description. The CZ is a little bit heavier to carry. It's a little more brick-like with how its weight is distributed, especially since a lot of the weight is riding above your belt line. It kind of wants to tilt out. A good holster for this would be one that's slightly longer, the way the Harry's holster is, than the actual P-01 muzzle. It gives kind of a keel like on a sailboat, so the gun doesn't try and tilt out over your belt a whole bunch. Whereas the Glock being lighter weight, I think most of that weight is probably up in the grip. The Glock actually carries a little bit better in a muzzle length holster, but I still recommend a longer holster for the 4-inch models. And since the Glock's grip angle is just a little bit steeper, I had an easier time getting a firing grip on the Glock in the holster. However, the CZ was no slouch. I just needed it to ride a little bit higher above my belt so that my hand wasn't getting into my belt on the draw. Either one of these guns benefits from a weapon-mounted light such as the Streamlight TLR-7A, which is what I have. It adds more weight in the muzzle down below your belt so the gun feels more stable, and I would recommend something like that if you are looking at one of these for everyday carry and can handle another 2.5 ounces. Now, concealment on either one of these guns, it's about the same. I didn't have a big advantage either way since the guns are effectively the same dimensionally. Now, if you're not used to drawing a gun with an aggressive beaver tail such as the P-01, it can be a little bit of a learning curve as you might spear yourself on it initially as you figure it out, which was the case when I started carrying this. But in very short order, you get used to it, you train around it, and you just get right underneath it, and it feels great. It has a great index point. And the one thing that I absolutely love to death about these DASA guns is when you're carrying them, you can hammer check when you holster. All hammer checking is taking your finger off the trigger, obviously, and putting your thumb on the back of the trigger. So if something does get trapped in the trigger guard as you go to holster, the hammer can't move to the rear. And you can actually feel it through your thumb that something's trying to pull your trigger. This is a fantastic peace of mind, and I wish you could do this on all guns. So it's time to talk about reliability. Right now, somebody has furiously started typing a comment to remind me that the P-01 has passed the NATO certification test. It's fired 4,000 rounds without a stoppage, and they can take it apart and put it back together and all that great stuff. I know, I've read that as well. The Glock guys are gonna say, hey, this is in more LEO holsters than any other brand in America. This is the best, most reliable, most durable brand. Anything else that I may have left out? I know. I've read all those things too. They're both very reliable guns until they aren't. The CZ-P-01 has a retaining pin right here that retains the firing pin, whereas the Glock uses a stop plate to retain the firing pin. This is a big deal because if you dry fire the P-01 a lot, you can shatter this little pin in here. I've not done it on this CZ, but I've done it on basically all the other firing pin block CZs that I've had. You cannot dry fire CZs without putting an O-ring back here to stop the hammer from hitting the firing pin or using a snap cap. The other big black eye for the CZ manual of arms is the trigger return spring. Now, earlier in the video, I mentioned that this has an aftermarket trigger return spring. It's because about 1,600 rounds in, the trigger return spring on this gun broke. When the trigger return spring breaks, you can manually reset the trigger by pushing it forward, but it will not swing forward into the resting position with the broken trigger return spring. Now, that is a freak accident. Maybe the spring was installed incorrectly in the factory. I'm not really sure, but I do know that the typical spring life is about 10,000 to 15,000 rounds. A good change interval is about 10,000 rounds to maintain it. But this gun was not dry fired very much at all, being a carry gun, and the trigger return spring still broke in pretty short order. The other black eye of the CZ is going to be its short throat. The Glock is the equivalent of a beer sewer, and if it fits, it ships. You can put almost anything in a Glock and it will fit in the chamber and more than likely fire down the barrel. CZs have much shorter throats, so if you are a reloader, you have to make sure that you are loading your ammo to the shorter CZ chamber, because if you are loading to like a Glock link, some projectiles will get into the lands on the CZ. So that's something to be aware of. If you're loading for a bunch of different guns, make sure that you're loading to the CZ length for your 9mm projectiles, because just because it goes in other guns doesn't mean it's going to go in this gun. That said, that's a pretty minor thing that's only going to affect reloaders, because all factory ammo that I've shot through this gun has been fine. All round nose ammo has been fine, and all hollow points, and I've probably shot at this point 7 or 8 different brands of defensive ammo through this gun. And the other side of reliability is maintenance. Performing maintenance on a Glock is stupid simple. The Gen 5s make it even easier because there are only 2 pins you have to punch out, and you can use the cap of a ballpoint pin if you need to totally take the gun apart down to pins and springs, and it takes about 2 minutes maybe once you're experienced. Whereas the CZ, if you want to take it apart, you're going to need about 4 tools. You're going to need a pin punch, a roll pin punch, a heavy hammer, and a screwdriver to get these grips off. And it's going to take you probably 10 to 15 minutes to get it all the way down, and that much again to get it put all the way back together. And as far as cleaning it's concerned, the Glock's just a little bit easier. If you look at the geometry or lack thereof, it's just a bunch of rectangles, and that makes it pretty easy to kind of get in all the corners. They don't use locking lugs on the barrel, but force lock up through kind of that lug right there at the back of the barrel hood. Whereas the CZ has one locking lug in front of the hood of the barrel. So when you're cleaning, you do need to scrape kind of the carbon off of that, as it will kind of build up in there. But all in all, it's not that difficult to clean the CZ. It's just a little bit easier to clean the Glock. Just some more miscellaneous things about the gun. The Glock is going to have way more options in aftermarket stuff. There's about 1 million sets of sights you can get for this, whereas with the P-01, there's like 4 or 5 brands of sights that you can get, so hopefully they make some sights you like. The Glock 19 is going to come with 3 15-round mags, and the P-01 is going to come with 2 14 or 15 round mags. I understand the new ones are coming with 15 round mags. Mine came with 2 14 round mags. However, the magazines that come with the P-01 inspire much more confidence than the plastic ones with the Glock. It's not to say the Glock magazines are unreliable, it's just that the build quality on the magazines for the P-01 is significantly higher. And finally, the pride in ownership, the CZ just feels way, way better in hand. Running the slide, feeling that steel on aluminum slide back and forth. This is a much higher ownership experience. It just feels like a quality gun. There's a reason why CZ fans think they've got the best gun in the world. It's because it feels really good in hand, and just operating it, feeling all the controls, it feels like a quality gun. There's just something about them that exudes quality. And the Glock really doesn't have it, frankly. So the final choice, if you had to pick one of these, which one would you pick? Let me know in the comments. Now, my answer on this is going to be unsurprising. I compete with Glocks, so I have picked the Glocks. For me, the additional weight of the CZ, the additional effort in mastering the double action pull just wasn't worth it when I can get amazing groups with the Glock 19. But both guns, this size is really phenomenal. Just the compact size being just enough to get a fighting grip on the gun, but not enough to grab your shirt when you're carrying, is really spectacular. So it really is going to come down to which action do you prefer. Do you want the hammer or do you want the striker? Personally, life is simpler living with a Glock, so that's the direction that I've gone in. So if you've made it this far, please go ahead and hit the thumbs up button, give me a like, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell to be notified when new content comes out. If you want to take this to the next level, you can look at the links in the description and potentially support me on Patreon. I've got a blog over there that a lot of people find value in, and you get a look behind the scenes at what's coming up next. And if you want me to make a video, that's the best place you can ask me to make a video. As always, I appreciate you guys watching. Take care, and I'll catch you on the next one. See you guys.